Snyder Bros, we gotta move on, bro. What Matt Reeves and James Gunn are doing for DC, we should be happy about this. We did something that we hadn't done before with the Snyder Cut, but we also need to accept that Zack Snyder, his directing style, his filmmaking style is not always going to be received well for a larger space.
Crazy Stupid Podcast.
Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, if this is your first time watching, we'd love it if you could hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell so that you are aware of when we post things. Hey everyone, so as you know, TikTok's probably gone. So if you want to continue seeing the content that we're going to be creating, in our bio, you'll see a link to all of our social media accounts. If you wouldn't mind, please feel free to follow us on our additional accounts in the case that TikTok does get banned. We can still continue to have our great conversations that we've had. We really appreciate the support that you guys have had with us over the last 2 years, and we want to continue this for many more. Thanks.
All right, this is part 2 of our top 10 movies and TV shows of the year. If you notice any costume changes, it's because we already recorded half of this episode yesterday night.
Oh, God.
And all the footage was lost. So we have to do it again.
Lovely. Lovely, lovely.
But this is how dedicated we are to the craft.
My last honorable mention is I saw the TV Glow.
And that is number 9 on my top 10.
Man, this film being like an allegory for what trans people are going through. I just think the one thing that really sat with me is the conversation of like the correlation with mental health and trans people. That conversation has sort of shifted to you identify as trans because you have a mental health problem, as opposed to this trans person has a mental health problem because society failed them. Mm-hmm. And that distinction, I think, is necessary in order to have a healthier, more accurate conversation on what trans people are going through, because you can't deny that there is something there. A lot of them are dealing with things like the unaliving rate is like super high. I've talked to you about this before, where I saw a post online where there was like an older, trans man, and the comment section is full of like younger trans people surprised, where they were like, oh, we get to live that long, because in their mind, they had never visualized it. They never seen it, because the life expectancy really starts to teeter off like around age 30, 35, especially with Black trans men and women, was like where it was really shocking and daunting. Exploring that, I feel like, is necessary. And I think this film did a really good job in that.
I agree. I really, really liked this movie. I wanted to watch it. When I saw the trailer when we were seeing some movie. I was immediately like, oh, I have to see that.
Yeah.
When I saw people talking about it online, it was really interesting because the promo for the movie they sort of promoted it as like a horror movie kind of, or like a thriller. And so there was like the reception to it, what I saw online was kind of split. Like there were some people that were like, I watched it, it wasn't scary at all. I was kind of like, what the heck? And then there were other people that were like, I watched the movie and then I just bawled my eyes out afterwards and just cried. And I feel like it really just depends on how much you can relate to and tap into the emotions that they are representing through the film. I definitely think that they intentionally were trying to draw that allegory for like trans people and the trans experience. Yeah. And I also think that you don't have to be trans to relate to the emotion that they're getting at. Justice Smith did such a good job portraying a person who is just absolutely miserable and can't put his finger on why. This feeling of like, I'm living my life like alienated from myself, like I'm observing myself live this life that I don't think I should be, and something is just off and something is wrong. Yeah. And I don't know what it is, and I'm afraid and I'm scared that I'm never going to get out of it, because that was the scary element of it. It was like his friend comes back and offers what could be an out. You're not sure. She might be wrong. She might be crazy. We haven't seen her for years. Yeah. Could be an out, could not be. But as a viewer, you're kind of wanting him to try it, because you're like, if you don't, like, you will not escape whatever this is that is dragging you down. The whole film just feels miserable. And he never does it in the end. And then you obviously at the end, it ends with like this outburst of just raw pain and emotion that's really hard to watch, and that I have thought about many times since seeing it. It was just such a masterful way to depict that feeling. And I think that's a feeling that a lot of people can relate to. Yeah. Of just like, is this going to be life for me forever. Am I going to escape this? I don't understand exactly what it is that is wrong, but something doesn't feel right. And what you were saying about the fact that like it's not something innately wrong with you necessarily, it's something with society that is off. They did a really good job of showing that, because in the movie, literally what is off is that he is living in a reality that he is not supposed to be living in.
Exactly.
Like, that is it. It's not him. He's literally not where he is supposed to be. Everything around him is what's wrong. He just cannot see it. And I feel like that's true for so many people. I feel like the reason why we have so many more people now that are being diagnosed with, like, you know, depression and ADHD and all of these different diagnoses, partially it is probably because people are talking about it more and we are more aware. But also I think it is because, like, society itself is becoming more and more
unsustainable, unlivable.
Yeah. Feels like we're reaching a boiling point in so many different aspects. The economy feels crazy, and late stage capitalism and climate change and politics and pandemics and everything. It just always feels like we're heading towards something terrible.
Yeah.
We're not meant to live like that. That is having a huge impact on our psyche.
Yeah.
And I feel like this film just, I don't know, to me, it just did a great job. It was number 9 for me. I really, really liked it. My last honorable mention is Abbott Elementary. Love, love, love Abbott Elementary. There was just so many good, like, dramas and stuff this year that didn't make it in my top 10. And I'm dramatic. I'm always going to pick something serious over something funny. It's always laugh out loud for me. I literally laugh out loud at the things that the characters say and do. My only qualm is for Quentin Brunson. We got to get this thing on a regular schedule. That thing has got to come on every Wednesday. I can't do this thing where there's random Wednesdays where it just doesn't come on for no reason. We need... I don't know what's going on. But I'm always so confused, and then I forget about it.
Yeah.
And then I'll go back and I'll watch like 4 episodes at a time that I missed, but I was actually gone for 6 weeks, but there's only 4 episodes missing because it didn't come on randomly 2 times for some reason. That's my only issue. Other than that, I absolutely love it. I think it's flawless. No complaints and no notes.
Listen, man, it is kind of carrying the traditional sort of sitcom comedy genre, in my opinion, because the viewership that they're pulling in, I know obviously, you know, it's available on streaming services like Hulu, but even on like normal television, the numbers that they're pulling in based off of how other comedy shows have sort of come and have quote unquote flopped, an algorithm would tell you not to invest in a show like Abbott. But for some reason, it's tapping into something that's really relating to people and it's landing. You just have to give your respect to Quentin Brunson on that regard, because, yeah, I mean, she's kind of keeping that particular side of the industry afloat. I mean, obviously, there's some other ones. I think you mentioned like Hacks is like doing like a pretty good job. But I do kind of feel like Abbott Elementary is kind of like in a tier of its own. Obviously, like the numbers, but culturally, they are always tapped into like cultural, like pop cultural conversations or like online internet humor that they put references in, or they're bringing in a character that went viral for something, and they always cast them perfectly.
And I hope we get more. I think there's actually a couple, though, now that I'm thinking about it. You also have Only Murders in the Building.
Yeah, I guess that's another good one.
And What We Do in the Shadows. There's a few.
I still feel like Abbott
is definitely carrying.
Yeah.
Yes. But I was just saying, like, there are some other like popular comedies that are like well received critically that like are also in that realm and conversation. But Abbott is the top one for me.
Number 10 for me is Under the Bridge.
That is number 7 for me.
Incredible show. Listen, you give me a crime mystery drama, I'm gonna eat that up every time, bro. What really has sort of stood out to me is just the powerhouse that Lily Gladstone is, that she is becoming over the last few years or so. And it is just kind of like refreshing. She brings this sort of subtle acting. She's not always going to be like the most like dynamic person in her expressions and the way that she inflects her voice and whatnot. But what she's able to do with her eyes, with her face, with her body language.
The emotion lands.
Yes. Yeah. Every time, regardless of the role that she's in, she's just so good, and it never feels redundant. What we saw in Killers of the Flower Moon feels so different than who she was in this one. And that's a testament to her versatility. And so hats off to that. I thought the show was incredible. The writing was great. I don't have any like negatives really.
That was number 7 for me. Also in my top 10, I really, really liked that show. I'm always going to like a well done true crime, not like something that's trying to be like salacious or anything, like not what Ryan Murphy does. Okay.
Yeah.
I will sometimes dibble dabble in Ryan Murphy's work, but I don't always think that he is the best, and he's definitely not the most respectful in how he tells the stories. But like a very well done true crime that is trying to be as honest as it can be, bring through a very clear message, and show respect to the people, like the living victims of the story and the ones who are no longer alive. I'm always going to enjoy. I really, really liked this show because I liked how it explored these two ideas that were like clashing heads the entire time, but they both were extremely valid in their own.
Yeah.
And they represented it through Lily Gladstone's character and then the character who was the author of the book it's based on, Rebecca. Because on the one hand, you had Rebecca, who her entire motivation was to portray these kids with as much empathy and sensitivity as she could, right? Even knowing that they very likely had done something terrible and horrific and violent, but she still approached them as humans and as children who had been failed by the system, and that what they do is at least partially a result of the way that they have been failed. Not that they're not responsible for their actions, not that they shouldn't be held accountable for what they did, but just that we cannot just call them monsters and call it a day, right? Like, these are children who have feelings and emotions and who are being forgotten and left behind and abandoned by people who are supposed to care for them. And then also that was clashing heavily with this other perspective that was voiced through Lily Gladstone's character of the fact that like these children did a horrific thing to Rena because she was being dehumanized when she was alive because she was Indian. Yeah, it was just like this painful reality of the fact that like even while you can empathize with these kids who did something terrible but had also been through horrific things in their life, you still have to like honor the fact that they did this terrible thing because they were dehumanizing Rena. And like there's no real solution to it. It's just like a terrible thing that just happened. But I appreciate the way that the show explored those two ideas and respected them both and didn't try to say one was right or one was wrong. Just that like this is what it is. And also still called out the fact that Rebecca probably went the route that she did because of her own racial identity. Yes. It's complex and it's a difficult story to tell respectfully to all parties involved, but I think the show did a good job. All right, so my number 10 is Slow Horses. Absolutely love Slow Horses. Ever since season 1, I have been a fan. Most spy things is like fashionable and sleek, James Bond, and you know, and I eat that up. I love it. Slow Horses is like, no, none of that. These are just bumbling, like these are just people bumbling around, like doing their best. And it's hilarious. Like it's laugh out loud funny. Like the wit and the jokes in this show are genuinely so funny, but also the thrill and the action is very real. Like it is edge of your seat entertainment. You are never sure what's going to happen. The characters do not have plot armor. Like things can and do happen to characters that you love and care about. And at the same time, it's hilarious. Yeah. Those are two things that I feel like is hard to do at the same time, but they did a wonderful job. Yeah. And it's peak entertainment every time. I hope it never ends.
So my number 9 is A Murder at the End of the World. I think this show, in terms of like crime solving, has stood out to me more than Under the Bridge, more than True Detective, all of it.
Oh, this actually may have messed my whole list up, the fact that I forgot it.
This show, that had a lasting impact on me, really.
Yes.
Primarily because Harris Dickinson.
That's the guy, right?
Yeah. I would not be surprised if I see an Oscar in his career in the near future. He has like a kind of screen presence where it's not like imposing or dominating, but he sort of pulls you in and you're kind of gravitated toward everything that he does. It reminds me a little bit of Timothy Chalamet.
I was going to say that too.
I've seen people use that Frank Ocean song like Moon River like a few times. I don't think I have seen anyone do it as well as this show did.
See when they meet
in the
for
restaurant, in that diner. That stood with me because, you know, they met online. And so there's like this timidness of like, oh, you might be kind of crazy. And then for some reason, the music sort of sways us as we watch them put their guard down, where like a caution sort of look turns into like a very like timid smile. And then the episode kind of ends there, which is like, okay, that was beautiful.
Their chemistry was so good.
Yes.
Immediately upon watching this show, I texted my older sister who also watched it, and I was like, we need a romance with them, a romance movie with them right away. Yes, dang. I wish I had remembered that show. It definitely would have been on my list somewhere.
Yeah.
My 9 through 6, we've already talked about. So my number 5, Shogun.
What a surprise, bro. I fell in love with that show instantly.
Yeah. It was a type of storytelling and like political maneuvering that we probably have not seen since like the early seasons of Game of Thrones that I just absolutely adored. I also really liked this getting a look into the world at this time in that place.
Yes.
We've definitely had other shows and movies and things that are in that time period, but very few focused on Japan at that time and what the world, honestly, that whole half of the world, we're usually in Europe.
Yeah.
When we're talking about that time period, but seeing like what this other side of the planet looked like and felt like at that time was really intriguing to me. Mariko's character was just absolutely magnetic. I want that actress to be in so many other things moving forward. She stole the show for me every time. Anytime she was on screen, I was like, yes. And I really respected the ending that they gave her character. And also, we were talking about this yesterday when we did our first date.
Hiroyuki Sanada.
He always shows up in like random things. You'll see him pop up, usually because it's like a role that they need for martial arts for or something, you know? So he'll be like a random side character. Yeah. And he often dies. Like he often does not survive. But I've always felt like he deserved more. And I'm certain like he's been doing things in foreign films that I just have not been watching. Yeah. But I really loved seeing him in a lead role because he did such a great job. He did such a great job. I had so much respect for his character. There was this like discipline to him and this like just extremely clear-minded focus on what he was trying to achieve. He was extremely regal. You just like immediately were like, oh, this is a person that should be respected and also a person that you should not mess with. Yeah. That is always 10 steps ahead, right? No matter what, he's got an end game. He's got a plan that he's going for the whole time. He did such a great job of portraying that role. I just thoroughly enjoyed it.
So good, man. I knew that this show was taking it seriously and respecting the Japanese culture, the history. In that first episode, when the Anjin-san, like he is sort of seen as like, oh, this primitive land, you know, like some white supremacy vibes sort of inherently in him of like, we're sort of superior for some other reason. And then the Spanish captain, he's on the boat with them and he's like, you still don't get it, bro. And then they're about to pull up to where Toranaga lives and he's like, just take a look out there and you tell me if you feel like England is at like the peak of the world in terms of everything. And it's this realization that really pulled me in of like, oh my goodness, we are about to see a story be told about a people of color with an intelligence and a craftiness to them in the political side that we hadn't seen.
Yes, and also a genuine fight against colonialism.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of the way that we tell history is of like people of color just sort of being like outsmarted and taken advantage of by like Europeans with like their superior weapons and like, you know, blah, blah, blah. Like that's basically how we tell the story of what happened to the indigenous people in America. That's basically how we tell the story of what happened when Black people were stolen off the coast of Western Africa and put onto slave ships. That's kind of like how we choose to tell it. And I think we do that because like it makes it easier morally because it's like, look at these like, you know, poor people just being taken advantage of against these like whatever, you know. But like the truth is that there was way more interaction between these groups of people, and there was way more, like, for better or for worse, a lot of the times these people who were being colonized or whatever, a lot of times there was way more involvement, either through them directly taking advantage of like the resources or whatever was being provided by these people, or them actively trying to fight against them. It wasn't this direct thing of like these super intelligent, strategic, smart Europeans coming and just being able to outsmart people. That's not what was happening. I know that messes with our picture of like, well, they were wholly bad and they were wholly good. And I know that messes with our understanding that way. But it is true that like the interactions between these two groups of people was often way more complicated than how we like to tell in history. And I think we do our ancestors a disservice to dumb them down. Even if it makes them more
not like complicit in everything.
Like a little, like, even if it makes them like a little bit more complicit, for lack of a better word, in what happened. I think we need to acknowledge the fact that like they were playing the game too. They were not just falling victim to it every time. It's another reason why I really liked Woman King. It tells that story. It's uncomfortable, but it is true.
My next one is Wicked. I know you were a little shocked that it made into my top 10. I still, even after the couple of weeks have gone on, I don't know how or what they did that made me love it a little bit more. But I think really it was the relationship with Glinda and Elphaba that made this musical stand out a little bit more. I do feel like the best way, at least right now in the climate that we're in, to sort of explore dynamics based on like social identities, doing that through relationships feels like that is the easiest way for people to consume that, to process that, because it feels more real. It doesn't feel as preachy. You're seeing it played out in a very tangible way. And I think they did that in a very flawless way with Elphaba and Glinda. And so I think that's why I ranked Wicked so high.
It didn't make it in mine. But I absolutely love that it's in yours, because now we can open our eyes to the world of
that's
musical theater.
You see, you've already lost the plot. This is an anomaly. Last one, Penguin. Penguin has given us the blueprint, very similar to what we got with Daredevil, on how to write a television show about superheroes, or a television show that is set within a comic book universe. I could give so much praises to all the actors, to the directors, the producers, to the writers. Everything about it was incredible. What Matt Reeves and James Gunn are doing for DC, we should be happy about this. Snyder Bros, we gotta move on, bro. We gotta let this go. Listen, we did something that we hadn't done before with the Snyder Cut. When has that really ever happened to this degree? But we also need to accept that Zack Snyder, his directing style, his filmmaking style gives way for a very niche audience that is not always going to be applied and relatable and be received well for a larger space. And that's really showing up in the way it's getting reviewed and the box office, because none of his superhero movies made $1 billion. That should tell us something, especially when those movies were being released. This was still peak superhero era. This is when Marvel put out a movie, $1 billion. So it wasn't like what we're seeing right now, where it feels like a hit or miss. This was peak superhero era, and it wasn't landing. We got to accept that and not assume the worst out of the people that don't resonate with his filmmaking style. It's not that people didn't get it. A lot of us do, but sometimes it doesn't land well for everyone. He's moved on. Snyder's moved on. He's congratulated James Gunn. Henry Cavill's moved on. We got to do the same, y'all. I've seen them review bomb like more recent like DC stuff, which again feeds into this narrative of like stuff like that delegitimizes the fan review side of the conversation on websites like Rotten Tomato and IMDb, because that feels like an orchestrated effort that you feel like gives you a win. It doesn't, but it hurts the Discord online when people want to have that, because it's this always thing of like, oh, they stole this from Snyder, or that camera shot, oh, they inspired it from Stardom. And some of that might be true. There's a lot of things in terms of visualization that Snyder did bring to the superhero comic book film genre, but we got to accept that is not always going to be enough to make a really good superhero movie. The standard is too high now with what we're getting with some of these more recent ones.
I always really like the visuals and the vibe. I feel like he knows how to bring a vibe, an aesthetic to a movie that I like. I love the vibe of Man of Steel, but I have always felt about him that he needs a partner. Like he needs another person to help him with like the narrative and like the pacing and the plot and the arc. So like work in tandem with another person that excels in those areas, and then apply his skill at like the visuals and the aesthetic. He just needs like another person. It's always the story for me every time. Even the Snyder cut for me was like,
I can see you was trying your hardest to stay awake.
Babes.
It's funny because I watched that 3 times. I love it.
And I can watch a long movie, but it just was not intriguing.
I get it.
But going back to the Penguin, I feel like what the Penguin and the Batman have shown us is that all Batman stories work much better when they are like in isolation apart from the rest of the DC superheroes and Justice League. And when you choose to tell it not as a superhero story, but as like crime, detective, noir, gang. When you choose to tell it like that,
World's Greatest Detective,
it becomes so much better.
World's Greatest Detective. The Batman, it felt like a buddy cop sort of film.
And I quite liked it.
Yeah.
And of course, you still gotta throw in some scenes of Batman beating people to a pulp. But the bulk of it was like, let's solve the crime.
Yes.
Let's figure out who is doing this. I like that. I feel like that is where Batman and Batman universe stories are at their peak.
Yeah,
it's really tough to tie him in with the other heroes.
Yeah, and I think we just haven't seen it done well yet, where he's gone up against other, non-human beings. Because he's human, the best way that we've seen it is when he's like the sort of the tactician, the strategist, the leader, sort of giving out the responsibilities. But that isn't really what we got from Snyder, and I think that was jarring for some people.
Yeah, it was not believable when he was fighting with Superman. The whole time I was like,
Eventually, we knew he was going to have to use kryptonite.
Yeah,
the suspense was hard for me to always lock in because we knew that was the only route that he could go. There were other routes that he could have gone in the comics. Like Superman gets his power from the sun, and so there are versions where Batman goes up against him and he uses that against Superman.
Superman gets his powers from the sun?
That sort of superhuman strength, some of it does come from like our atmosphere.
So if he was like in pitch black darkness,
like there was no, so remember, I don't think you remember some of the comic book movies or some of the comics in general. He's like extremely weak because they've locked him up in a space where whatever energy he's getting from the atmosphere, he's not receiving it there. And then when he breaks out, several minutes, you see him like start to get stronger.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, so that's part of his lore there that I've seen other people use. It didn't have to be the kryptonite thing, but you just knew Snyder was going to do that. And also the Batman killing people with the guns. He thought it was like, this is a super cool rad thing, but it goes against Batman. And there were some...
Batman was...
Yeah, there's a lot you forgot.
That's like the one thing.
I know. There were some other things that he had ideas for, and Warner Bros. Was like, hell no. There's a love triangle with him and Lois Lane.
Babes, why?
There's so much stuff that I'm like, it just wouldn't have landed well. Warner Brothers did them dirty. I'm never going to cape for a billionaire corporation. F them. But I do feel like his legacy, parts of it were probably saved that he couldn't fulfill his vision in the fullest that he wanted, in the full extent.
Oh, because you think it would have been worse for him?
I think so.
Interesting.
Thank you all so much for tuning in. That sort of does it for our list. We'd love to hear what you all think about our list. Please no judgment on any of the things that we haven't watched. We just, as mentioned, we don't do this full time, so just give us some grace.
It's been a wild year.
Yes, we will get to it, I promise. But we would also love to hear what your favorite movies and TV shows were. So please give us your ranking and your list in the comments. Continue the conversations. We love the conversation that you guys bring in our comment section. So we're appreciative of you on that. We want to wish you guys a happy holidays in any way that you celebrate it, and a happy new year. And we will see you all next time. Take care, everyone. Peace.